someone will say, "Oh yeah, I recognize you." And if cameras could see what we were witnessing, that was going to be a totemic, historic moment. It was actually something I had dreaded for most of my career. Gosh, you could be in the hot seat when that happens. I was in the seat when my producer came into the newsroom to say that.
Hello, hello, and welcome to the latest episode of But Is It Legal with me, Simon Marshall. I am the founder of TBD Marketing, a legal marketing agency, and today, many of you will already recognise from seeing her on screen, we're joined by Joanna Gosling. Joanna, it'd be great if you can give me a quick introduction about where you are now and what you're doing, what you're up to. That'd be great.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for having me on, Simon. It's nice to see you. So I'm now a mediator at Irwin Mitchell, which still gives me great pride to say that I work for a law firm. It's been like 18 months now, but it obviously was a big shift for me in career terms to move from a newsroom to a law firm. And it's a great place to be. I'm actually a commercial and a family mediator, but I'm in the family team at Irwin Mitchell, but expanding to mediate in other areas also within the firm. And I have a bit of a portfolio career going on, so I do other things as well. But mediation really was the driving force that led me away from the BBC and want to do something different.
That's amazing. I mean, so many people recognise you on screen from you having been broadcast into their lounges on a regular basis. But I came onto the call, I thought I immediately know something about John. I thought, what led you to kind of make that decision to go from the newsroom and to come over to mediation instead? What was the prompt?
There were kind of lots of things. I loved the job I did, but over time, I was starting to get concerned about how we have difficult conversations because it was increasingly becoming clear that there is a sort of societal prize now placed, I think, on having opinions, wanting to be heard, and not necessarily wanting to listen. And even within the neutral environment of the BBC, it was sometimes proving difficult to have conversations that involved complicated issues. As a journalist, you always want to distill things and make them understandable and find the sort of way through. But inevitably, things are not always so straightforward, and people have to be prepared to listen. So that was something I was mulling and thinking, how do we do that in broadcast terms? And then separately, I was seeing through the people that I was interviewing what was happening to individuals caught up in conflict and how someone would come and speak about it because they'd found themselves in an ongoing situation which was causing difficulty, not being listened to. You can put the spotlight on, you can give the voice, you can give the ear to them, but ultimately they go away and they're stuck in that. So that always was staying with me. And then separately I had my own experiences of conflict as well, and so all of these were coming together to make me question what I wanted my next steps in my work life to be. And it was mediation, so I trained as a mediator.
How long did that process take? Was that something that you undertook for months, or was it a longer period? Or I don't know. I've never thought about that. How long it takes to actually convert over to being a mediator?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually, because I think that when I said, okay, I'm now leaving to become a mediator, it looks like it was just an overnight thing, but it wasn't. It was quite a lengthy thought process. And then from the moment I actually did the training, that was in 2021. That's when I first trained as a commercial mediator. I then subsequently did the workplace training and then the family training. So nearly 4 years ago now. So it was quite a journey, and it's 2 years since I've left the BBC. So there was a crossover period where I was sort of fully immersed really in both worlds and making um, good contacts in the world of law, meeting up with people whose brains I wanted to pick, who I wanted to observe, mediating, and just to understand better about how the environment works, and to talk about mediation, because like with anything, I think once you get the desire to find out, to learn about it, and to pursue it, I was just I just wanted to talk about it. So I was knocking on the doors of lots of mediators and lawyers, and wanting to have conversations around it. So yeah, it was a fairly long process in the end.
I love that though. I love that. That selection of it. I love what you're talking about how some of those conversations feel unresolved, maybe when you've interviewed people and there's more to it after as well. I think that's it's really intriguing. Tell me, what is it? Because you've got quite a portfolio career. There were something you said earlier. What does the classic FM kind of element of life bring to your life, as it were? What does it do for you that you don't necessarily get out of the mediation front?
Yeah, it's kind of the unusual element in the pack, I think. Although I sort of rationalize it by thinking, well, it's all about how to live well, is how I see it, because like I think that's what mediation brings. It's how to have good conversations, how to find yourself, how to find your way out of a difficult situation. And so sort of in that, part of a good life is being able to take time to really decompress and to enjoy the simple pleasures, and music is very definitely one of them. So it came along unexpectedly, and I am not an expert in classical music, in that I was never trained. I don't play an instrument, and that was my first response to the question as to whether I'd like to go and work there. And they said, well, we just want someone that's passionate. And I am. And when I love something, I'm really passionate about it. I want to talk about it. But still, I thought, what can I bring to it? And really, I'm a researcher. I've been a researcher effectively for 30 years as a journalist, and there's so much to explore in the world of classical music. It is absolutely rammed with geniuses and amazing stories. And that's what took me in, the ability to be able to explore that, to learn as I went, and to take the listeners as well, hopefully on that journey of it with me. So it's been great, and it's also been a perfect antidote to news.
Yeah, I bet. Is it a conversation starter with people then? I mean, you've got the news element now, you've got classic music as well. Is it something that people mention when you're kind of doing the mediation day job, as it were?
And it's interesting actually, in the mediation day job, occasionally people will say it. Funnily enough, I actually don't think anyone's ever said it in the family mediations. The commercial ones, yes. And I don't know why that would be. I wonder whether it's because, when someone's going through a divorce, separation, wanting to, needing to talk about arrangements for their children, whatever it is, it's so intense and all consuming. I don't think that they care who's in the room. They just want someone to help them. Whereas occasionally it has happened in others that someone will say, oh yeah, I recognize you. And then yeah, particularly actually when I was still at the BBC, I'd always have to say, well, it's completely separate. I am just here as your mediator. It's the same skills, but it's a very different environment. It's behind closed doors, which is obviously one of the key differences.
Given the subject matter, I mean, I've experienced it personally. So, given the subject matter, then how do you decompress? How do you go and post rationalize? How do you get your well-being back where it needs to be after you've dealt with a difficult family mediation?
One of the really important things for me is at the start of every day, I will begin it with some form of exercise or being outdoors. So whether it's a run, a walk, a swim, just to start the day with a clear head, because those are the moments when you can think through things. And particularly if I've got a mediation coming up that I want to to think about the issues that might arise, it's a helpful place to start. In terms of being in the mediation, something that I learned in the training, along with the different tools that you will bring to a mediation to try to unlock it, but one thing that I do find helpful in terms of not getting too personally invested, because I think sometimes there is that temptation as a mediator when you want to see things resolved, is don't work harder than the clients. But the way I see it is more, don't want it more than the clients, because you will do everything that you possibly can to help find the way through. But ultimately, sometimes you're going to find yourself coming up against a situation that seems to be fairly intractable in that moment, at least. Obviously it's never the end of the conversation. You can come back, but if I have one of those really difficult mediations that doesn't end as I would have wanted, I can't switch off to it straight away. And I do, again, I'll sort of probably go outside for a run or a walk or something, just to mull over, what could I have done differently there? What did I miss? What what were the issues? And I really will try to work that out in my mind. And sometimes it's, you can't do that immediately. It'll be in the next day or so. So, you don't just leave it. But then it is also important to park it and sort of remember that thing of Yeah, sometimes it's just how it is, but you can always come back to it and revisit it. And that's another important thing that I've learned along the way. Sometimes there's a sense, if we're facing a difficult conversation, you've kind of got to get everything out there in that moment. And if you say the wrong thing or you don't say something, you've missed it. And it's just never like that. You can always come back, you can always revisit. And again, I'll do that as a mediator. I'll pick up the phone, email, whatever is required to make sure that things aren't left in a way that just means that those who are in the conflict are sitting at home thinking that they're feeling quite stuck.
I heard some wild statistic about the amount of mediations that maybe don't settle on the day, but settle within 24 hours of the mediation
Yeah.
taking place. And actually, it's really
Mm.
interesting that, as you just said, I think that post mediation run, the amygdala being put to rest from it, allowing the rational
Mm.
part of your brain to kind of process things, as it were. The same thing happens to those people who are coming along to the mediation as well. They're there to consider, rationalize, think about what you've talked about, get up the next day, talk to their partners, and then think, well, no, wait a minute, we came a long way in that conversation. Is that fair? Do you observe that in people that they?
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's not even 24 hours. I mean, I'm thinking particularly of a commercial mediation. Sometimes it will be longer than that. You might keep it open even for up to a month because things need to be worked out. If other uh, interested parties are involved, whether it's insurer or whatever, sometimes it does need a bit more time to play out, but it doesn't mean that it's over. And yeah, people have had a long, sometimes 2 hours for family mediation. If you're doing a longer form of mediation, half a day, it's a lot to take in, particularly when you're emotionally invested. So I think that knowing when to say, okay, enough for now, take a break and just process it and come back, it is very helpful.
It also separates that desire to have your day in court from the facts and the elements that are kind of make up your case or your side of the argument as well. There are two distinct things there. One is, I've been wronged and I want to be heard, as it were. You, in your final BBC sign off, I think I heard it live actually when you said it, was
Uh,
that you'd
mm,
always wanted to give a voice, lend an ear, and shine a light as well. Are they
mm,
are they the
mm.
core skills, do you think, that you've been able to pour over into your mediation role? That idea to deeply listen and clearly communicate with people.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously it's not me doing that. They need to give that to each other. And
Mm.
that's what I'll sort of talk about at the start of the mediation process. And, multiple points along the way, you get that opportunity to speak to people about how they can put their best side forward in the mediation. So you can do it in your first meeting with them when you're talking through about, obviously the key part there is really it's an opportunity to understand what's going on for them, what they want, how they feel about it, priorities, all of that. But it's also just sending the message the other way, not to question where they're coming from, but just to point out that the best way that they can be heard by the other person is to listen. So, and you just sort of sow that as you go along, and I'll say it at the start of every joint session as well. And just that reminder, it's how important it is to be able to say what you want to say and to feel heard. And it's hard to listen if you don't feel like you're being heard yourself. So I think it's a really important element of finding the breakthrough. And yeah, so often in communication it is about, I just want them to hear what I want to say, I want them to understand, and both people are feeling that strongly and are unable often to hear each other in that.
You've obviously come to the law as a bit of a second career. I know it's a portfolio that you've got in terms of other things that you do,
Mm.
but do you think the law would be better itself if it had more second jobbers, people coming to the law maybe as a second career, maybe a bit later on? Is that something that it would benefit from?
I don't know, interesting. I haven't thought about that. I think that what I'd probably say to that actually is, when I was doing journalism, I thought all I could do was journalism. And I know that it's not just me that thinks like that, because I've had that conversation with many people since leaving. You're in one field and you think that is all you can do. And I was really lucky. I loved what I did. So it wasn't like I was sitting there casting around for something else to do, but I wasn't thinking about the skills that I was bringing to the job and how much I was really honing those skills over a long period of doing that job. And it was only afterwards when I started to talk to other people, or before when I was having the conversations, as I say, that started actually before I even left, but with people in a different environment, that I started to get a sense of the skills that I had and how transferable they were. And I think that is a very common thing for people to not understand their skills. And I think it brings a lot to you when you do understand your skills, because you can be more conscious about how you use them and where you apply them. And that might lead to doing something else. I think to come into law at a later stage is hard. I did at one point, when I was thinking, how do I kind of, what do I do next? How do I address these questions that I have in me about where I go? I did think about training as a lawyer, and I just thought there was no way I could do that at that point. And also, still, it was, mediation is really, that aligns with how I think and where I want to be. So it I ended up doing that. But I know a number of people who have turned to the legal world later in their career, so it can definitely be done. But it's, yeah, it's never easy. It's never easy to take a plunge from one thing to another anyway. It's like, how do you manage that when you've got other financial responsibilities and everything? But that's another question.
I think that's true. No greater joy though than doing something that's an expression of like who you are and what your values are
Mm.
as well. I think that mediation, it clearly sits with you well. You're
Mm.
enjoying what you do. Can you, and along those lines as well, it'd be interesting to hear a bit about your board roles and championing for women to be on boards. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It came about because I did some work with Deloitte, and it was about, amongst other thing, women on boards. And I was asked if that might be something I would be interested in, and I said yes, yes, it would be, because I'm very interested in workplace culture. And I mentioned, I think I also trained as a workplace mediator, and I've done workplace mediations, and I think that workplace culture and communication, internal and external, is a huge area of interest for me. So I was open to it, but didn't know how to sit, what it involved to sit on a board, because as a journalist, you kind of, you have your window on all worlds really, but I'd never been in a boardroom. I didn't know what that would look like, what that required. So I was really lucky. I got invited to do the Women on Boards program with Deloitte. And so that gave me the glimpse, the insight, and the meeting people to have those conversations. So that opened up another area of interest, which I've been really lucky to be able to pursue a bit.
And I'm right in thinking that you're on a board that relates to mediation now as well.
Yeah, the Family Mediators Association board, which is great.
What have you got out of that, of being part of that community?
I think that one of the key things when I was going into mediation was not just doing the work, it was talking about it. It was getting profile out there around mediation, because our culture is not to think, when we're involved in a conflict, well, how do we amicably resolve this? It's right. How do I persuade the other person? They're completely wrong and I'm completely right. And it's, we end up with quite polarized conflicts. And mediation has not been just embedded in our systems at all. So I wanted to be able to play a bit of a role in raising an awareness of mediation. So sitting on the board kind of gives me that. Um, and alongside that, of course, things have changed a lot since I entered the world of mediation, since I joined Irwin Mitchell. The procedure rules in the courts, civil and family, have changed, so that now actually mediation is more embedded. And it's also interesting to be able to be on the journey with a group of mediators as the the system starts to change itself, and see where that goes and how it evolves.
Wonderful. Last question then from me. You've been really generous with your time, so thank you.
Mm.
If you were making a show reel, can you give me one highlight from the news anchor career and one from your mediation career?
The one from the journalism career would be actually one of the last things I did. And it was actually something I had dreaded for most of my career, in that it was always in the background, and it was the passing of the Queen. And the reason for that dreading it is because as a journalist, there was a huge amount of focus on, obviously, that was going to be a totemic, historic moment. You have to get it right. So there are rehearsals, there's a lot of pressure and a lot being done behind the scenes over many, many years to get that right. So you're always aware, gosh, you could be in the hot seat when that happens. And I was in the hot seat when Pope John Paul II died. And it just showed me that all of the procedures kind of and the plans can go out the window. So I thought, well, it's easier just not to be there when these big moments hit, something like that. Um, I was in the seat when my producer came into the newsroom to say that, well, initially she said, are the microphones off? And I knew at that point it was obviously going to be something very serious, sort of important that she was going to tell me that potentially I'd need to be about to deal with. So we didn't know at that point what was going on, but we did know that something was happening. And it ended up really being the privilege of my career to be there for that moment, because you are suddenly so aware that you're sitting there and that you're going to be telling viewers something that is of huge importance. It will impact people differently emotionally. It will, um, it might be a shock. And it was it was unexpected to be sitting there, and it was, yeah, it was, as I say, it felt like a privilege. And um I then was there through that period of the handover to King Charles. So that was, yeah, I did over 30 years as a journalist, many, many enormous moments, but I would say that was sort of, that was a full stop that felt right. um in mediation terms, I the first big mediation that I did that settled when we really thought that there was no chance of it settling. I was co-mediating, and we had to work incredibly hard to actually even get everybody into the room. It was at the International Dispute Resolution Centre. It was booked the day before the mediation. Information came in that meant that it didn't seem like we'd be able to go ahead, but we felt it was really important to start to try to build some trust between these two sides that had been polarized for a very, very long time. And the way that the mediation began, the other mediator and I were sitting at opposite ends of a long table, and the teams were on the other sides, and we just looked at each other, and you can feel a shift in a room. And that was the first time that I'd really had that, and it was incredibly powerful. And yeah, and we said at the time, we wish there were cameras here, because if cameras could see what we were witnessing, no one would be in any doubt about the power of mediation. So I think that one.
I was just reflecting on that as you were talking about both of those experiences together. They're both quite a celebration. The personal element of it is quite private, isn't it? Those victories of yours, like the conducting yourself in the way that you have to when you have to tell the nation the news that their monarch has passed away, and equally, you have to take this very private kind of victory, as it were, that you've under loads of rules and you can't tell anyone about as well. And I wonder that I don't know, I don't know how well I deal with that. I think the idea of bottling up and not being able to tell anyone I'd really struggle with. So yeah. So anyway, listen, congratulations on the role that you played in relating to both of those two things. I mean, they're clearly huge landmarks in both the different worlds. Um, Jenna, thank you so much for your time today. I assume that it surprises people on a regular basis when you turn up to things and they think I recognise you immediately as well. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to spend some time with you today. I hope life at Irwin Mitchell's treating you well. If you're watching today's edition and you've enjoyed it, please can you share it with your friends? And if you like it enough, then please do subscribe to the rest of the podcast. It's on Spotify and YouTube as well. Joanna, thanks again.
Thank you for having me.